An ideal vacation that turned into a documented nightmare. 2 female students vanish without a trace in the wild jungles of Panama. 10 weeks later, their perfectly dry backpack is found. Inside are working phones with a minute-by-minute log of survival and a camera that took 90 eerie flashes in pitch darkness. What happened there? Where civilization ends? You are on the Raccoon Chronicles channel, and today, we will look into real hell. Let's go. This is not just a story of a disappearance. It is a minute-by-minute documented chronicle of how a civilized person faces merciless nature. They denied themselves unnecessary spending, worked as waitresses in cafes, crammed foreign words, and dreamed of a big adventure in a tropical paradise. This is exactly how this trip began for 2 young, smart, and adequate Dutch female students. 21-year-old Chris Kremers and 22-year-old Lisanne Froon were the complete opposite of reckless adrenaline seekers. They were distinguished by adult responsibility, pedantically planned their every step, constantly wrote to their parents, and did not seek deadly risks. And it is this indisputable fact that makes their subsequent disappearance in the dense, impassable jungles of Panama in the spring of 2014 so shocking and frightening. The girls flew to a small, picturesque Panamanian village of Boquete, which is cozily nestled in a valley, but is surrounded on all sides by majestic mountains and ancient cloud forests. Their main goal was noble. They wanted to brush up on their Spanish and help local children as volunteers. But upon arrival, an unpleasant surprise awaited them. Due to a banal administrative overlap and confusion in the paperwork of the language school, their volunteer program was shifted by a whole week. The girls suddenly found themselves left to their own devices. They had a lot of free time in a completely unfamiliar exotic country. And right here lies the first, most important answer to the question, why? Which armchair critics so often ask with anger. How did 2 inexperienced city students suddenly decide to go into the wild jungle alone, ignoring the paid services of local professional guides? The answer lies in the insidious, vigilance-lulling illusion of safety that the modern tourism industry creates so masterfully. The route called El Pianista, which the girls chose on the morning of April 1st, was advertised in all tourist brochures and on forums as an easy, pleasant, and safe walk for a few hours. Locals often walked their dogs there. The trail was wide, well-trodden, and seemed no more dangerous than an ordinary forest park somewhere in the outskirts of a European city. Chris and Lisanne, dressed in light summer shorts and thin tank tops, taking with them only one small backpack containing a bottle of water, 2 smartphones, a camera, and a little cash, set off, being 100% sure that they would return safely to the city by dinner. The first half of their path, carefully recorded on their digital camera, perfectly confirms this relaxed carelessness. We see on the screen dozens of bright, joyful selfies where the girls are smiling sincerely, posing against the backdrop of green mountain slopes. The sun is shining brightly, and there is not a single, even the slightest hint of the impending catastrophe around. They walk briskly, not looking tired, and calmly reach the so-called Mirador, an open observation deck at the very top of the mountain. It is important to understand that this Mirador is the official, final point of the safe tourist route. Exactly here, on this sun-drenched peak, lies the Continental Divide, an invisible but cruel geographical border between inhabited civilization and the real, primeval tropical hell leading to the Caribbean Sea. According to all unspoken safety rules, any sane tourist who has reached the Mirador is obliged to turn around, take a beautiful photo as a keepsake, and go along the exact same, already familiar and safe trail back down to the cozy city of Boquete. But exactly at this point, Chris and Lisanne make the most fatal and irreversible decision in their entire short lives. They do not turn back, but step straight beyond the divide, delving into the treacherous northern slope of the mountain, which leads into the wild, completely unexplored jungles, where navigation becomes impossible, where there is absolutely no cellular connection, no other people, and no laid, safe trails. The reason why smart and responsible girls went further is frightening. Survival experts and rescuers call this dangerous psychological phenomenon the trap of an easy start. The fact is that the trail immediately beyond the divide initially looks deceptively welcoming. It seems just as trodden and inviting. It smoothly and easily descends down the slope. Walking downhill is easy. The sun is still shining through the branches, and tourists begin to seem that they completely control the situation. That behind the next turn, another beautiful waterfall or a picturesque clearing for a perfect shot awaits them. They are literally intoxicated by the beauty of tropical nature, endorphins from the walk, and the full sense of their own invulnerability. In such moments, a city dweller completely forgets that in thick jungles the terrain and landscape can change radically in a matter of minutes, and this easy, pleasant descent down on the way back will turn into an exhausting, practically impossible steep climb up slippery mud. Take a pause and write in the comments. Have you ever had moments in your life or on vacation when, yielding to a foolish excitement, a desire to make a cool photo, or simply out of pure curiosity, you went off a safe route? Did you ignore warning signs, warnings of locals, or advice of guides, hoping for banal luck and thinking that nothing bad would definitely happen to you? Be sure to share your real experience, because exactly this tiny, momentary human presumption most often becomes that very terrifying point of no return. Chris and Lisanne fell into exactly such a psychological trap, thoughtlessly stepping beyond the invisible line where the comfortable laws of the 21st century are instantly multiplied by zero. Studying their digital footprint, we see how the photos on their camera begin to subtly but frighteningly change. Carefree selfies with wide smiles disappear forever. The angles become more gloomy, random, and anxious. The landscape around them rapidly, like in a horror movie, turns into a dense, humid, suffocating wall of greenery. The wide path turns into a dirty rut that branches out and gets lost among the giant slippery roots of trees, and the shadows from the crowns become longer and colder. They continued to descend into the so-called Caribbean side of the mountain range, which has a bad reputation among rescuers due to its wild harshness, steep, deadly gorges, and a tangled network of mountain rivers, the banks of which are like stone traps. A detailed forensic analysis of their phones shows a frightening, icy chronology of how quickly and ruthlessly their illusion of tourist safety collapsed. Judging by the timing of the photographs, they walked beyond the divide for only about 2 hours before the terrible truth reached them. They got lost. The sun begins to inevitably tilt towards the sunset. The humidity pierces to the bone. The temperature in the mountains begins to fall rapidly, and any attempt to find the way back only leads them deeper into the green labyrinth. And here comes that very chilling moment from which any normal person gets goosebumps. Just some 2 hours after they took those carefree, joyful selfies on the sun-drenched top of the mountain, at 16 hours 39 minutes of April 1st, Chris takes her iPhone, removes the lock with trembling fingers, and dials the number 112, the Single International Rescue Service. Just 12 minutes later, Lisanne from her phone also desperately, with a sinking heart, tries to get through to the Panamanian police at the number 911. But both of these desperate attempts end in an icy, indifferent, and hope-killing silence in the dynamics of the smartphones. In these wild, ancient gorges beyond the Continental Divide, there is never was, and never will be, a cellular network signal. Imagine this primeval, paralyzing animal terror. You are in a darkening tropical forest. You are dressed in thin shorts and light tank tops that do not warm you at all. Around you in the thickening darkness, wild birds begin to scream eerily, monkeys roar, and the temperature inexorably drops to a critical mark. And your expensive smartphone, this main symbol of safety and connection with the outside world in the 21st century, suddenly turns into a useless, dead piece of plastic and glass. They made their first and last mistake on this journey. They stepped over that very invisible border from which tourists no longer return on their own feet, and now their first, most terrible and cold night in their lives awaited the two defenseless students. A night that will become only the beginning of their unbearably long, agonizing, and detailedly documented in electronic logs path into absolute darkness. Imagine the first night in the wild, tropical jungles of Panama. Thick, impenetrable darkness swallows everything around, and the air temperature, which during the day seemed so comfortable, rapidly and mercilessly drops to 10 degrees of heat. Two young students, Chris and Lisanne, dressed only in light summer shorts and thin tank tops, sit pressed against each other on cold, wet stones, listening to the frightening cries of night predators and the pressing noise of a mountain river. Exactly at this moment comes the full, chilling realization that they are alone in this huge green hell. Their young life now hangs by the thinnest thread. What does any modern city dweller do in such a critical situation? He frantically reaches for his phone. And here begins the second, darkest chapter of our investigation, which forensic scientists will call the electronic diary of death. The Dutch police, having received the found backpacks of the girls many months later, were able to extract from the internal memory of their smartphones the exact, minute-by-minute digital chronology of their slow fading. These dry lines of computer code tell us a story not about stupid, panicking children, but about two incredibly strong and disciplined adults. Finding themselves in pitch darkness, they did not start thrashing in hysterics. They did not turn on the bright flashlights on their phones to mindlessly shine into the emptiness, scare away beasts, and waste precious energy in vain. They immediately understood the harsh truth of survival. Their phones are not a toy and not a flashlight. This is their only ghostly chance for salvation. The battery must be protected as the greatest value in the world, much more valuable than food or water. The analysis of the logs shows the stunning, almost military endurance of the students. The 2nd of April, their first full day in the green trap. They turn on their phones early in the morning, logically hoping that during the night, they could have accidentally entered the coverage area of a cell tower. They synchronously dial the number 112. Holding their breath, they wait for several infinitely long, agonizing seconds. See the cruel inscription, "No network," on the bright screen, and immediately, without the slightest hesitation, completely turn off the devices. They do not look at old happy photos to somehow calm their shattered nerves. They save absolutely every precious percent of the charge. Look at the screen of your mobile device and write in the comments. What percentage of charge do you have left at this very second? How quickly do you begin to get nervous and frantically look for an outlet with your eyes when this figure drops below 20% in a safe and warm city? And now just try to imagine that primeval animal terror when these 20% of the charge. This is your only thin thread connecting you with salvation, and around are only endless kilometers of deadly jungles. Be sure to write your honest thoughts, because exactly this continuous psychological torture by the battery melting before their eyes slowly killed the girls all the following days. The 3rd and 4th of April, the digital diary in the memory of the devices captures one and the same exhausting routine of survival. A short call to the rescue service early in the morning, the same fruitless call during the day, the inscription on the screen, and the immediate turning off of the power. Many critics have a logical question. Why didn't they try to write long farewell messages to their relatives or shoot videos with explanations, as is often shown in movies about survival? The answer lies in the rigid, pragmatic logic of the human brain working in a mode of extreme stress. Writing long texts or recording videos with sound requires a constantly turned on, brightly burning screen for many long minutes. This is a colossal, unacceptable consumption of energy, which they firmly swore to protect until their last breath. They stubbornly and naively believed that professional rescuers were already actively looking for them with helicopters, so they saved the charge only for that cherished moment when at least one weak strip of the antenna would appear. But this saving strip never appeared once. The 5th of April becomes the first truly terrible and irreversible turning point. The battery on Lisanne's Samsung completely and irrevocably discharges after another vain attempt to get through to the Panamanian police. Lisanne's modern phone goes out forever, turning into a dead weight. Now the 2 exhausted frozen students bitten by tropical insects are left with only one working device, Chris's iPhone with a charge melting before their eyes. Just think about this suffocating nightmare. They sit on wet, slippery stones by a stormy mountain river, drink icy, dirty water with bacteria. Their young bodies rapidly weaken from a complete lack of food, and their only hope for life is enclosed in one half-discharged phone. And right here, on the 6th day of their stay in the jungles, the 6th of April, the electronic log records the strangest and most inexplicable event in this whole investigation. Chris's iPhone turns on normally again. The screen lights up, but the system logs that the correct PIN code for unlocking is no longer being entered. Someone in the jungle simply presses the power button, looks at the lock screen, and turns off the phone, or tries to enter the usual password, but fatally makes a mistake in simple numbers. Why does a smart adult person, who for 5 long days unmistakably entered his memorized password, suddenly stop doing this? Relying on harsh facts, experts have built 3 frightening theories. The first theory, the darkest and cruelest, says that by the 6th of April, Chris Krimmers could have received a severe injury incompatible with movement. For example, falling off a slippery stone into a deep gorge, losing consciousness, or even dying from extreme exhaustion. Lisanne, suddenly left alone in this green, endless nightmare next to the body of her friend, takes her foreign iPhone to call for help in a blind panic. but she banally does not know this secret PIN code. In a state of deep shock, she tries to guess the numbers, but predictably cannot do this. It remains for her only to senselessly turn on the screen to look at the current time or try to make an emergency call without completely unlocking the menu, which is still useless without a cellular network. The second medical theory explains this frightening strangeness with the password by the fact that after 6 days without a crumb of food under icy tropical rains, the body literally begins to collapse from the inside. The strongest clinical dehydration sets in, a feverish delirium, realistic hallucinations, and deep confusion of consciousness begin. Chris could still be alive on this day, but her exhausted brain simply forgot these 4 cherished numbers forever. The memory gave a fatal failure, leaving the girl looking at the glowing display with uncomprehending, fading eyes. The third purely technical version is completely devoid of any dramatic romance. In conditions of 100% suffocating tropical humidity, when the clothes and the backpack itself were soaked through from the downpours, the touch screen of the iPhone could be thickly covered with a film of condensation. It began to glitch uncontrollably and physically ceased to respond adequately to the touches of frozen fingers rubbed to the blood, programmatically not allowing to enter the correct password. But whichever of these versions is true, this incorrect PIN code is that invisible watershed after which it becomes obvious. The situation finally went out of their control. Their hope broke just like their digital gadgets. The 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th of April. The digital diary in the phone turns into a creepy, fading cardiogram of a dying patient. The iPhone is turned on for only a few pitiful seconds without any attempts to enter a PIN code at all, as if someone alone, in total absolute loneliness and deaf darkness, simply presses the saving button to illuminate the surrounding hostile darkness with the cold light of the screen for 1 short second, or simply to make sure that he himself is still alive. The 11th of April at 10 o'clock in the morning, Chris's iPhone turns on for its very last time for exactly 1 minute and 15 seconds, after which its exhausted battery dies forever. Their only digital connection with civilization was completely broken, leaving them alone with the indifferent mountains. When the screens of their smartphones went out forever, cutting the girls off from the rest of the civilized world with a deaf wall of digital silence, a completely different frightening witness entered the game. At the very bottom of their tourist backpack, all this long time lay an ordinary digital camera, which they protected and did not take out for a whole week. It was this compact device that recorded the strangest, chilling, and inexplicable episode in this entire tragic story. We are moving with you to the 3rd chapter of our investigation, to that very terrible night of the 8th of April, when their exhausting struggle for life reached its terrible climax. Just try to vividly imagine this picture. 2 girls have been in primeval conditions for long 8 days. 8 endless days without a single crumb of food, under icy tropical downpours washing away everything in their path, exhausted by insect bites and suffering from the deepest dehydration. Deep night sets in, and all around stands pitch black, thick darkness black as pitch, in which it is physically impossible to discern even one's own hand. And here, in this frightening emptiness, at about 1 o'clock in the morning local time, one of them takes the camera out of the backpack. A mad series of flashes begins, defying initial logical comprehension. Over the next 3 long hours, the digital camera takes exactly 90 photographs in a row. Just think about this crazy number. 90 blinding flashes pierce the thick darkness of the jungle, taking a shot on average every 2 minutes, as if a blinding police strobe is working. Experts who months later will study this film frame by frame will encounter a real visual nightmare. The overwhelming majority of these pictures show nothing but a black, yawning emptiness, large drops of pouring rain and blurred bushes. Why does a deeply exhausted person spend the last precious strength to press the shutter button into nowhere, time after time? To answer this complex question, we must categorically discard any cheap mysticism and turn on the harsh logic of survival. There are 3 maximally realistic theories that scientifically explain these flashes. The first theory, the most pragmatic, says that the girls used the powerful flash simply as the only light source available to them. In the conditions of the complete absence of the moon due to dense clouds, they needed to illuminate the space around them at least for a fraction of a second. Perhaps they heard the frightening noise of rising water in the mountain river and tried to urgently cross to safer high stones, using the light for navigation so as not to fall into the abyss. Or someone dropped the last bottle of water from weakening hands and desperately tried to find the loss on the ground. The second theory, even more dramatic and logical, suggests that these flashes were visual signals for help, a cry of despair directed into the night sky. The fact is that it was on the 8th of April that the search operations reached their peak. Search helicopters flew over the jungles, and armed groups with powerful flashlights and signal flares worked in the forest. It is quite probable that Chris and Lisanne heard the distant roar of rotors through the noise of the rain, or saw the weak gleams of strangers' flashlights. Realizing that no one would hear their torn voices because of the roar of the river, they began to maniacally shoot flashes into the sky, hoping that rescuers would notice the blinking white light. But the thick crowns of tropical trees reliably hid their desperate signal. The third theory, from which a treacherous chill runs down the spine, is that the flashes were the only defense mechanism. Wild jungles teem with dangerous night predators, hungry jaguars, and poisonous snakes. Perhaps the girls heard the crunch of branches or instinctively felt that someone was slowly sneaking up on them in the dark. In animal terror, having no weapon or fire, Lisanne began to aggressively blind the unknown creature with bright flashes, trying to scare and drive the predator away from their shelter. Whether they tried to illuminate the way for themselves, gave signals to rescuers in the sky, or in a panic scared away a wild beast, there is no exact answer until now. But let's return to the photographs themselves, because among the empty black frames, the investigators found several pictures that make real blood run cold in the veins. These pictures ironcladly prove that the girls did not just sit and submissively wait for death. They actively tried to survive. In one of the frames, tree branches are clearly visible, neatly laid out on a large stone, and pieces of red plastic are attached to them. This is a classic signal marker. The girls tried to create a bright, contrasting spot against the background of the jungle to attract the attention of rescuers from the air during the day. In another frame, a scrap of shiny foil is visible, specially placed on a stone as a light reflector. These physical pieces of evidence prove that they were in full consciousness and thought as rationally as possible. But the most terrible and inexplicable frame bears the serial number 590. This picture has been haunting detectives in nightmares for years. On it, snatched by a blinding flash from pitch darkness, the back of Chris Kremers' head is captured in close-up. We see only her thick red hair, surprisingly clean, not tangled with dirt or blood, and absolutely nothing more. The face is not visible, the body is not visible. only hair against the background of absolute blackness. This picture spawned a wave of the darkest theories. Why did Lisanne photograph the back of her friend's head deep at night? Some forensic scientists suggest that by that moment, Chris could have received a severe head injury during a fall, and Lisanne, having no flashlight, used the flash in the digital screen of the camera simply to see how deep the wound was and whether there was bleeding. Other harsh medical experts believe that by the night of the 8th of April, Chris was already dead. Her exhausted organism simply could not stand the cold and hunger, and Lisanne, being in a state of unbearable grief and psychosis, took this last farewell photo of her deceased friend, realizing that she was left completely alone. 90 flashes in the dark. This is a chronicle of absolute despair, a cry for help that no one heard. When the battery charge in the camera finally ran out, the jungles plunged again into primeval indifferent darkness, forever hiding from us the last hours of their lives. And now, it only remains for us to sort out the creepiest material finds that local Indians will accidentally discover. Those very blood-chilling finds that will turn the investigation upside down and completely destroy the convenient official version of the authorities. 10 long, agonizing weeks the Panamanian jungles kept their icy silence, as if a huge green ocean had forever swallowed the 2 young female tourists without a single trace. Large-scale search operations with dogs, helicopters, and hundreds of volunteers gave no results. The police reached a dead end, and the heartbroken parents of Chris and Lisanne already began to lose the last ghostly hope of simply burying their children humanely. But in mid-June, wild nature, suddenly and cruelly, gave up its first terrible piece of evidence, which turned the course of the whole investigation upside down and instantly destroyed the soothing official version of the authorities. A local Indian woman from the Ngabe Bugle tribe, washing clothes in the stormy waters of the Culebra Mountain River, which translated from Spanish ominously means River of Snakes, accidentally noticed a bright blue tourist backpack on a large stone. This was that very backpack with which Chris and Lisanne so carelessly and joyfully climbed the sunny Mirador on the 1st of April. And right here, upon detailed examination of this terrible find, experienced investigators faced a real, confusing forensic paradox that still drives millions of internet sleuths crazy. The backpack was in perfect, practically pristine condition. Just think about this physically impossible fact. For 10 weeks in this region, the most powerful, tree-washing tropical downpours went on. The Culebra River repeatedly overflowed its banks, turning into a roaring stream of mud and stones, but the blue backpack lay on the stone, clean, not torn, and most importantly, dry inside. When the forensic scientists in sterile gloves carefully unzipped the zipper, they did not believe their eyes. Inside, as if someone had carefully packed them for a long trip, in perfect order lay 2 fully discharged smartphones, that very digital camera with the frightening night pictures, the 2 passports of the girls, sunglasses, $83 in cash, and 2 women's bras. Not a single item suffered from the destructive tropical moisture, not a single paper dollar rotted, and the electronics turned on after the very first charge in the forensic laboratory. How is this even possible without the intervention of a cunning serial maniac who allegedly mockingly planted this backpack for the police? To answer this question without cheap conspiracy, we need to turn again to the harsh psychology of survival. The girls, being in their right minds, perfectly understood that these gadgets were their only ticket home. Most likely, Anticipating her imminent death from exhaustion or severe illness, Lisanne, as the most methodical of them, carefully folded all the most valuable things and documents into this backpack, took off the wet bra rubbing the inflamed skin to somehow ease breathing, and hid the bag deep into a dry, rocky crevice or under a massive stone visor where streams of pouring rain physically could not reach. They did this on purpose, leaving a kind of time capsule for those who would one day find them, so that the police could restore the chronology from their phones. And already, many months later, when the season of the most extreme floods began, the water in the Culebra River rose to an unprecedented height, gently washed the light backpack out of this dry stone shelter, and simply carried it downstream, carefully washing it ashore, right at the feet of the local resident. This realistic version, confirmed by hydrological engineers, completely excludes the presence of a mythical killer and shows the incredible strength of spirit and rationality of these doomed students. But the discovery of the backpack became only a dark prelude to a real nightmare, because after it the jungles began to give up terrible human remains. Along the winding bed of the Culebra River, over the course of several exhausting kilometers, rescuers and Indians began to find fragments of bodies. These were not whole skeletons neatly lying next to each other, as is often shown in detective cinema. These were disparate bones chaotically scattered by the roaring river and wild animals. Chris's pelvic bone, a rib, a fragment of skin, and, the most terrible find, a hiking boot, inside of which there was still Lisanne Froon's foot, protected by a thick sock. And exactly here, the Panamanian authorities committed their most cynical and unforgivable official crime. Wishing to hush up this loud international scandal as quickly as possible, which threatened multi-million-dollar losses to their incredibly profitable industry of ecological tourism, the official prosecutor's office of Panama hastily and rudely closed the case. They gave the public an incredibly convenient but illogical version. The girls allegedly just fell off a steep cliff on the very first day, fell into the river, drowned instantly, and over time their bodies were torn against the stones by the fast current. But this brazen bureaucratic lie crashes with a crack against the steel, documented facts that we have just disassembled so in detail with you. No one turns on a mobile phone strictly on schedule for 11 days, being dead at the bottom of a mountain river. No one makes 90 deliberate signal photo flashes in the dark, being lifelessly carried away by a mountain stream. No one folds their valuable things so pedantically and carefully into a dry backpack, rapidly falling into a yawning abyss. These smart girls did not die quickly and painlessly on their first day of vacation. They desperately, heroically fought for their young life for 2 whole nightmarish weeks in the green tropical hell, slowly, day after day, dying from wild thirst, piercing night cold and complete exhaustion of the organism, until death separated them forever. And before permanently closing this heavy, bleeding volume in our archive, I want to draw your attention to one more frightening detail that still does not let independent researchers sleep peacefully. One of the found ribs of Chris Kremers was unnaturally, frighteningly white, as if it was specially, under laboratory conditions, bleached with a powerful chemical solution or phosphorus, while Lisanne's bones had a natural, dark, organic color of decomposition. The police could not give an intelligible, scientifically grounded explanation to this, awkwardly making excuses with theories about volcanic acids in the local soil or prolonged exposure to the scorching equatorial sun on a lightstone. This creepy story is an unhealing scar on the body of modern world tourism. It cruelly, ruthlessly, and categorically proves to us, self-confident residents of the 21st century, that our civilized, cozy safety is just a fragile paper decoration. It takes just one careless step beyond the invisible divide, ignoring an old warning sign or sparing extra money for an experienced local guide, and you instantly fall out from the top of the food chain. You remain one-on-one with primeval, merciless chaos, which knows no human mercy, does not react to bitter tears, and is completely not afraid of your expensive modern smartphones, on the screen of which there is no longer a signal of the saving cellular network. Value your life. Never play roulette with wild nature, and always remember that the most terrible and invincible enemy wakes up exactly when you naively think that you completely control the situation. A perfectly dry backpack, an erased PIN code, and 90 flashes in pitch darkness. Was this a tragic survival mistake? Or was there someone third in these jungles after all? Write your boldest theories in the comments. The folder of Chris and Lisanne is closed, but our archive is never empty. Subscribe to Raccoon Chronicles. We remember those whom the system would like to forget forever.